Our chat activity class holds the main chat screen of the app, in which first we declared all of the required variables such as the conversation list and edit texts. Inside the onCreate method, we initialize the required views and variables. We set the adapter to our chat list view, and we also set the transcript mode for list view so that it always scrolls to the bottom whenever a new message arrives. In onResume, we set the isRunning flag to true to indicate that the activity is running, and in onPause, we set this flag to false. This means the activity is currently not in the foreground, so there's no need to update the view and its contents. The load conversation lists loads the sent and received messages from the Parse database by creating a Parse query object that sends the query to chat table of our Parse database. Now we check to see if the conversation list is null or not. If it is null, that means we need to load all of the earlier messages. Otherwise, we just need to load only the newly received messages from Parse. To load all messages, we query for records whose sender field is equal to the username of the logged in user, and the receiver field is equal to the username of the second user, or whose sender field is equal to the username of the second user and receiver field is equal to the username of the logged in user. The first gives us the sent messages, while the second gives us all of the received messages. To load only newly received messages, we query for records whose created at date value must be greater than the date of the last received message, and whose sender field is equal to the username of the second user, and receiver field is equal to the username of the logged in user. In this parse query, We also set the order by clause to descending, created at to load the message in the most recent order to the oldest order. We also set the limit to 30 to load only 30 messages at a time. Finally, we call the findInBackground method, which calls done, the method of the find callback interface that we passed in the argument. Inside the done method, we first check to see if the returned list of parse objects, which holds our conversation messages, is non-null and its size is greater than 0. We then start in a reverse loop to load the records from oldest to newest. We create the conversation objects from each parse object and add it to our conversation list. We then notify the adapter about data changes to refresh the list view. The conversation class is a Java Bean class, which represents a single chat message. It holds various properties of the message, such as the message text, date, and status. Then, we call the handler's postDelayed method with a delay value as 1 second. This will load our load conversation lists after every 1 second if the activity is running. This loads the new messages from the parse database. The chat adapter class is the adapter class for our chat list view. It extends the base adapter class and overrides the required methods. In the getView method, we first check to see if the message is sent or received, and depending on this, we load the related XML for the adapter view. We then set the various properties of the conversation to the text views. For sent messages, we also check the status of the message which can be sent, if it's sending or failed. We override the onOptions_item_selected method for checking the action bar's back arrow press event. This finishes the activity when the user presses the back arrow. The send message is called when a user presses the send button to send a new message. It first checks if the message text is empty. If yes, it does nothing and returns instantly. Otherwise, it hides the keyboard, gets the message text from edit text, and creates a conversation object with the message text and sender name. The sender name is set to the username of the logged in user, the date value is set to the current date, and the status is set to sending. We then add this conversation to our conversation list, notify the adapter, and clear the edit text. Finally, we create a parse object for chat table in our parse database and sets the sender, receiver, and message values for this object. We then call the saveEventually method of parse object. The saveEventually method sends the message to parse database. It then calls the done method of the save callback interface passed in the argument. The parse exception argument of this done method will be null if the message is saved successfully, and if so, we set the status to sent. If failed, we set the status to failed and notify the adapter about the status change.